Blue Apron is the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the country. For less than $10 per person per meal, Blue Apron delivers seasonal recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals. You can choose from a variety of new recipes each week, or you can let the Blue Apron culinary team surprise you. They don't repeat recipes within a year. You won't get bored. Right now, they've got summer vegetable and egg paninis. They've got the soy glazed pork and rice cakes with bok choy and marinated green beans. Customize your recipes each week based on your preferences. Blue Apron has several delivery options, so you can choose what fits your needs. No weekly commitment, so you only get deliveries when you want them. Each meal comes with a step-by-step, easy-to-follow recipe card and pre-portioned ingredients and can be prepared in 40 minutes or less. Guaranteed. Blue Apron's freshness guarantee promises every ingredient in your delivery arrives ready to cook, or they'll make it right. So check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/Bomani. You'll love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron, so don't wait. That's blueapron.com/Bomani. Blue Apron, a better way to cook.
The City Double Cash Card presents tips for watching sports with your friends. Number 5, be passionate.
Oh, shouting what I would have done on that last play.
I am way too invested in this.
Check it out. I'm completely overreacting, so you know I care.
Wouldn't it be great if everyone said what they meant? The City Double Cash Card does. It lets you earn double cash back with 1% when you buy and 1% as you pay. The City Double Cash Card. Double means double.
Welcome to the Right Time Podcast. The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Right Time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. Hanging out in for Bomani. 1-888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. And Mike Golick Jr., I'm going to make a definitive statement here. The world and you, I get to call you wrong at the very beginning of the show. This doesn't happen very often.
It's a good place to start.
The world was wrong if you stood up and said that we were going to get a trash fight that wasn't going to be entertaining and it wasn't worth buying. Today, you have to stand up, eat a little crow, and admit to the world, guess what? What we actually got was entertainment. We got a fight that was entertainment, and that in and of itself was a victory for many people, myself included.
Yeah, I mean, you can take it as a victory. I'll be glad to let you have that because I know you need that in your life at this point. But I think it's all about what you came into the fight expecting this weekend. And I think for the crowd, like myself, because you can twist my words if you want and say I was wrong, all I said going into this weekend was that turning on this fight, it ends whenever Floyd Mayweather wants it to end. And looking at the way the fight played out, you can make a very strong argument that that's still exactly what happened. We just got it out over a long enough timeline to feel like we got our money's worth out of a fight that you shelled out probably $100 for.
Can we not agree, though, in the process of looking at it? We're going to start with Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. The Straight Talk is many people expected that this fight wasn't even going to be worth watching, that it would be over in 3 or 4 rounds, that McGregor would be outmatched from the get-go, and above and beyond your concept of, hey, Mayweather can end it when he wants to end it. Most people talking about the fight, especially over the last 10 days, 2 weeks, weren't anticipating an entertaining product. And I don't think you can deny the fact that when you were watching the fight, you were watching something that at its very core, at the very least, it was entertaining.
It was entertaining, but I think you're talking about one camp that doesn't think what you are projecting on them. What I mean by that is the people that said this is going to be a terrible fight were our boxing analysts, were Stephen A. Smith, were Max Kellerman, were Teddy Atlas, and our boxing purists who said that from a pure boxing standpoint, you're putting a guy who's essentially an amateur in there with one of the best fighters of our generation. So of course it's not going to be a good fight, but everyone else who was part of the spectacle camp and said, well, I'm going to watch this because it's an oddity and because I can get together with my friends and bookend it with a fantasy draft and have some beers leading up to it and do all these different things, that group got exactly what they wanted. For me, it's like this season of Game of Thrones. If you came into this season wanting all of the same nuance and all of the same character development and depth, yeah, you might be a little disappointed, but that's a different crowd from people like me who said, you know what, I'm finally getting White Walkers and Dragons like I got teased all along. I knew this coming into it. I knew this is what it was about, and I'm satisfied because I got that.
You're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz, ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. Okay, we'll show our differences in personality because, of course, you bring it back to a Game of Thrones reference. I I will bring it back like the man I am to a Britney Spears reference. Because, see, I was in Vegas over the weekend and took my wife. We went to see a Britney Spears concert, and it actually made me think of this fight before the fight had happened. We see Britney, and I'm watching, and I'm thinking, you know what? She's lip-syncing the whole show, and not even trying to hide the fact that she's lip-syncing the whole show. She's sort of dancing, but not really dancing. But there were so many lasers and so much video, and the dancers around her were so good that it was a spectacle. And I was looking at it thinking, this is exactly what I expected. It might stink, but it's so entertaining to watch that I can't take my eyes off of it. I think in some ways, the fight actually managed to accomplish that. The fact that early on McGregor had personality, early on he was sort of, not only was he able to move, he was moving behind Mayweather so much. We didn't know what to expect. People hadn't seen that before. Watching it, it felt like he was on the verge of maybe losing control a little bit. It was interesting to watch because above and beyond everything else, you just didn't know what to expect, and you were sort of visually mesmerized by it. I think that's exactly what everybody needed in this fight. I got my money's worth out of the process of watching the fight, no matter how technically sound it was, because fact is, I was smiling the whole time I was watching it. Oh, you know what? We should just play that throughout the rest of the show. That give you a nice
flashback right there. You say you could just put that bed underneath the rest of the segment. I wouldn't hate it. I've been down a Britney Spears rabbit hole once or twice, but listen, I understand that point. I just think you're talking about grading on a different scale than some people were willing to going into the fight, because you're right. What we got created was doubt, right? In those first 3 rounds, when Mayweather was McGregor was winning those rounds, you got enough doubt. I heard Stu Gatz on the Dan Le Batard show earlier today said he actually looked over at his wife and thought, I actually am doubting Mayweather might win this. It may have been only for a split second, but it was enough doubt that even though it may have been artificially created, like you had a guy go out there and actively try and bet on himself for the 9.5 round over and then knock him out, TKO him in 10. All along, who we knew could probably put him down whenever he wanted, but we still got what we were desiring. They gave us enough, especially in comparison to what was the constant talk. Just don't be as boring and uninspiring as Mayweather-Pacquiao.
Can part of this be our expectations were so low, and I think that's something Conor McGregor actually talked about, the media not trusting his skill. This is what McGregor had to say.
But I tell you what, I enjoyed it very, very much. It was an honour for me to come over here in the boxing side and showcase my skills. I know there was a lot of disrespect and disregard for my skill. You know what I mean? I'm a multiple weight free fighting world champion. I was a little bit taken back by the disrespect and the disregard that I was shown. In fairness, Floyd and his team never actually showed that disrespect. It was just the overall, everyone else. And it was almost like a little bit of a jealousy thing, so I kind of just got over it. But the disrespect for my skill set was a little bit, it took me back a little bit, but I always knew that when the fight comes around August 26th, I'm going to show up and I'm going to give a good account of myself.
It's the right time. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. And maybe some of it was that we didn't trust the skill. I don't necessarily want to say it that way, but I think that most people thought he was just going to be bad. And at the very least, in the beginning, he wasn't bad.
I don't think this is about Conor McGregor being bad, though. When he plays the disrespect card there, it's sort of hilarious because if the shoe was on the other foot and we were talking about Floyd going over and trying to perform in mixed martial arts in that octagon with Conor McGregor, we'd be making all these same points and McGregor would be the first one lining up to say, you can't do what I do. This was about respecting Floyd Mayweather's skill set in a craft that he's actually been doing, this specific one, for his whole career.
I have a hard time, and that's Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks. Man, I got a hard time coming in this process and anybody trying to excuse where the fight took place, because at some point, I'm a little guy, right? And you're bigger than I am. The world knows that. And
understatement, sure.
If I decide that I'm going to run my mouth and we're going to have it out, and then I get my butt kicked, I don't get to turn around and say, yeah, but look at how much bigger he is than I am. I started that. I allowed that to happen. I didn't walk away from that. So I have a little bit of a hard time anytime that we try and qualify where the fight took place, how the fight took place, the rules of the fight, because McGregor put himself in that situation, right? I mean, he put himself in this situation to take home a huge payday and in the process get this huge platform and in the process lose a boxing match. I think what's all surprising to so many of us is that he went as far as he went, that he looked as good as he did. And until he was completely out of gas, there were people, it's not just Stugatz, there were people watching it, looking at it and saying, holy cow, I put my $50 down. I looked at it early on and I thought maybe I'll get lucky. Just didn't happen.
We put Floyd Mayweather up against a guy who had never boxed in this setting before. And then commented and said, wow, this looks amazing because it doesn't look the way Floyd's traditionally looked in the boxing ring, and acted surprised by that. Why would we expect it to look when all the talk was, well, how is he going to respond to Conor and what Conor might try and what things are different? No, when you're going up against a guy that you don't have to worry about in traditional boxing senses, I think it's going to look differently than it normally would, and yet we somehow acted surprised because that's what we wanted. A lot of this is going into it. You can confirm exactly what you wanted because this fight had all of it. If you want to believe that Floyd carried him to 10 rounds, you can believe that pretty easily. If you want to believe that Conor McGregor was better than we expected, sure, but we're all just kind of filling it in the Mad Lib slot that we already had opened up before with this weekend even got here.
Oh, such a conspiracy theorist. I mean, it can just be a great fight, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be one guy was toying with the. I mean, it could just be a fun fight. We want to make it so much more difficult than that. You can get in touch with us, by the way. 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed is out there. He's at M. Golick Jr. 57. Yeah, that's right. At M. Golick Jr. 57. I'm at Jason Fitz. You can get to us there. I want to continue the conversation because I have to ask you, Golick Jr., you and I both, I think, hate participation trophies. And the question is, are we suddenly cool with one here? Does McGregor get some credit for lasting 10 rounds?
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
All our guests join us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. This guy, one of our favorites, always gold status for him. Brian Custer from Showtime. Boxing. Brian, first and foremost, you looked fantastic on TV. Thanks for taking the time to join us. I didn't sneak in, man. I tried, but I couldn't find a viable way to sneak in. So, but you looked good. And when you look at the fight, did the fight look good to you? When you look at it, was it a good match in your mind?
I think it was entertaining. And, listen, I love the sport. I think for the people who paid $100, they wanted entertainment, and I think Conor McGregor gave them that. I think Floyd Mayweather, to the surprise of many, is the one who gave them entertainment because he was the one who continued to just come forward and throw punches. So I would say, when you talk about a classic fighting boxing match, no. But was it entertaining? Absolutely.
Brian, looking at this from the boxing side of things, was there anything that Conor McGregor did from a pure boxing standpoint, maybe technique-wise or other, that impressed you coming off of this night?
You know what? He handled himself well. And I think I loved how he popped the jab, especially early, and he connected often with his jab. And, listen, he used it sometimes to set up big power punches, like if I'm not mistaken, the second round when he hit Mayweather with that uppercut, and Floyd came off his feet with that uppercut. So that was good. But you saw why he's a novice when it comes to actually boxing, because when he got hurt and especially when he really got tired, he should have really held Floyd and clinched. And he didn't really know how to do it. He was grabbing him around his waist, things of that nature. That's what comes from experience with boxing, knowing how to clinch when you're tired, knowing how to clinch when you're hurt. So he didn't do that. That cost him. Other than that, listen, I think he did himself well. And I think we had talked about this in the past, Fitzy, when you asked me about this fight. Now, remember, I told you it can't go past 25 minutes because when you look at it, his record in the UFC, he had only gone they go 5-minute rounds, but he's only done it once in his career. And when he did it that one time, he gassed out against Nate Diaz. That's why I said it couldn't go past 25 minutes. It did, and that's what cost him.
And you mentioned that. We're talking to Brian Custer from Showtime Boxing. You mentioned that he looked gassed. Is there anything he could have done differently in your mind to prep for that, or is this just one of those things that you have to have the experience?
Experience, training. The one thing that Conor did that surprised some of us was, he kept all of his UFC guys. You would think he would hire, let's say, a boxing trainer, a boxing coach, but he didn't do that. He said, I have gotten to where I am with my team of guys, and I'm keeping them with me, even though they're mostly all UFC guys. And, he kept all of those guys for this fight. You got to train different. And, you remember during the show we had Pat Miletich on there, and he and Paulie Malignaggi did a great demonstration on things that MMA fighter has to do to convert himself to a boxer in the ring. But when we came out of that piece, one of the things I told him was, shouldn't his training been different? And Pat said, absolutely. It should have been more of an aerobic workout. And that's why you saw him tire after that fourth round. You could really see his legs got heavy. By the seventh and eighth, he was done.
Brian, talking about Floyd and his approach to this fight, is it not giving Conor McGregor enough credit to say that Floyd, the guy who went and bet on himself in that tried to bet on himself in that 9.5 round over, supposedly, had this in the cards all along, that he was going to drag this out, give people what they wanted, ultimately knowing that after a certain sticking point, he was going to be able to take Conor down?
Yeah, the thing about Floyd, he said that he could only bet, I think, $400,000 because one casino wouldn't take his money. Because he's actually a promoter as well now, and they said no, you can't bet on yourself because it would give the appearance that you are fixing the fight. And so he had one of his other guys, lay down, and as much as this casino would take was $400,000 in cash. So that's why he bet the over on $400,000 on himself. But he knew that. If you look at the history of Conor, especially in the UFC, he comes out hard. He throws nothing but power punches. That's going to cost you in boxing. That's why they call it the sweet science for a reason. You can't just come out slugging. You're going to tire yourself out. And I think Floyd knew that this guy's history is, okay, he's probably going to give me all that he has for it, probably about 4 rounds. And right in that middle part is where he's going to really start to tire, and I'm going to turn up the pressure. And then that's when I'm going to try to take him out, 7th, 8th round. Give Conor some credit with his chin, because I thought the first 3 rounds were definitely all Conor McGregor. He threw a lot of power shots. But then in that 4th round, you saw how Floyd started to turn it up. Conor kept using movement to try to move around. I think that cost him as well. But I think Floyd knew he was going to be mine. He wouldn't last the entire 12 rounds, but he knew he would get him in the late, maybe 8, maybe 9. But he said, as he said after the fight, hey, it took me to 10. I thought it would probably be a little bit earlier, but, credit to Conor McGregor for having a stiff beard.
You can follow him on Twitter at BCusterTV. Man, Brian, great job by you. We appreciate you taking the time, and fantastic job on the broadcast, my friend.
Hey, Fitzy, listen, I appreciate it. And next time, man, call me. Just call me. I will come out and bring you into the fight next time.
Oh, you just made a personal assistant, buddy. You never thought you could. No, thanks, man. Great stuff. Thanks, Brian.
You're with you.
Hey, I'll absolutely take you up on that. Appreciate it, Brian.
All right, be good, guys.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
You're listening to The Right Time, ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. You can get in touch with us through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at MGolickJR, MGolick Jr. 57. I'm at Jason Fitz. The excitement, I've had the opportunity. Here's a random fact, by the way. I don't know, Golick Jr. You wouldn't remember these things, but this is almost our anniversary. In fact, it is the anniversary of the first day that I met Mike Golick Jr. today. Our first TV show together was a year ago tomorrow. So
did you put that reminder in your calendar or something?
No,
I'm
my last
weirded out by this.
No, my last show as a musician was a year ago yesterday, and it came up on my Facebook and all that stuff, all these pictures of my last show. And you do remember the Alaska State Fair was my last show, so I remember that era in life, which means I flew directly from there to Charlotte. We met the next day. There you go. So in our year together, I think the most excited I've seen Mike Golick Jr. was, 1, when he discovered the Candy Dish at ESPNU. 2, and a very close second to this, would be over this sound from Stephen A., Teddy Atlas, going back and forth with each other. This is on the Sports Center that was past my bedtime, and I haven't heard this yet. So, Golick, do you have any preparation, any advice for me?
This is the best sound that came out of the event this week, and I would argue it's actually better than the fight itself. It's Teddy Atlas and Stephen A. getting lost in a metaphor that by the end of it, neither of them can either find even find their way out of. All the while, poor Steve Levy is just on the outside trying to take back control of something that he is clearly in over his head with.
McGregor forced a gourmet chef to be a fast order cook. That's what he did. He forced a gourmet chef to be a guy.
Doesn't that make it fast food? I mean,
it does.
Doesn't that make it fast food?
That's
Instead
exactly
of a la
what it
carte
does.
steak? That's what I'm saying.
He made him go in there.
Listen,
and he made him flip cheeseburgers.
Listen,
he made him
there we
go.
go.
He made him do something.
Hold on, Teddy. Hold on, Teddy.
But his character allowed him still to walk the guy down.
Wait a minute, Teddy. What I'm saying to you is this: if you go to a restaurant to get some steak, some filet mignon, and instead you get a burger. Okay, ain't it a burger? I mean, it's just a burger. That's what we saw tonight. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
He made the adjustment to be what he had to be. He had to be that.
That is fantastic.
Oh, just hearing Steve Levy get that stiff arm at the end of that segment from both of them as he's trying to rein it back in, and Teddy Atlas is having none of it right there.
The anger and the yelling and the accent that comes out of that was really, I mean, the word burger was barely understandable at the end of it. That is, they were passionate about the steak and the filet mignon and the burger bowl.
Shannon brought this up, and it's so true. You can actually hear them both progressively trying to one-up each other's New York accent as this goes along.
It's still a burger, right? It's still a burger.
That's amazing. They don't do that in the South. Like, as somebody that lives in Nashville, like, you don't get more Southern in your drawl when you're yelling at somebody. But the New York accent definitely flipped to another level there. That was fantastic.
No, but like my brother's wife's from Boston, and I can always hear when she gets angry, the accent that she normally hides starts to come out. Like with these two guys, the angrier they got, the less they could conceal their roots in all of this. And the best part is, I think they're arguing about the same thing. Like, they're both essentially arguing for the same side, that whatever was fast food is fast food. It's just that they're so used to having to disagree with someone, especially Stephen A., in the model that he usually operates in, that he couldn't let Teddy be right about the same thing he was trying to be right about.
That accent has tons of upside. Brought to you by Upside. Now save big on travel and get a big gift card every trip you buy. You'll love Upside.com. That's Upside.com. I can't figure out, though, if I go to a steak place and I order filet and I get a burger. Shannon, how was that again? How's that burger thing?
It's still a burger.
Yeah, if I get a burger, I'm not going to be that happy with it, right? Like, I wanted steak and I got a burger instead. I'm not pleased with that.
We were talking about this in another regard earlier today because North Carolina in their football facility put up "the ceiling is the roof," the Michael Jordan quote from last year at their pep rally, because Michael Jordan has enough clout to get something like that where he just blatantly makes a mistake, and it not only becomes a pop culture reference, but it becomes a calling card for your program. I wonder if Stephen A. is on that level where "Ain't It Still a Burger," though, could become something of a rallying cry somewhere, to where I'm going to be walking around in the hallway here, and that's going to be on a plaque or commemorated somewhere because Stephen A.'s got that kind of clout in the building.
I will give you $1 American cash to walk in someday. I mean, Michael Jr., you are everywhere right now. So someday you are going to you're gonna stand across from Stephen A. on First Take. I just predict this will happen. And if you will wear a T-shirt that says "Ain't It Still a Burger" on your appearance, I will give you $1 American cash.
Listen, I'll pay whatever it needs to be paid to start getting those printed here around the building. Like, I'm sure there's enough of a market for it here alone on the campus that we could get those made and sold in a heartbeat.
Oh, that's amazing. Jason in Boston. Jason, what do you got, man?
We're up against the clock, so I'll make it quick. Just think that boxing purists and MMA people don't understand each other. I don't know if you noticed this. I certainly picked up on it. Every single round, McGregor goes back to his corner. He's getting coached up. He's getting iced. He's getting water. Mayweather's going back, smiling like, you know what? It's a good day to work out. Really happy. I'm in Vegas. I'm just chilling. And the thing of it is all the books had later bets that were all value bets. I took the one at plus 210 that was the Mayweather ends between 7 and 12 rounds. You know, it's perfect. I think everybody got what they wanted.
I think everyone absolutely got what they wanted. By the way, very smart radio caller right there, knowing the clock.
Yeah, knowing the clock. Jason, thanks for the call, man. That is fantastic stuff by you and fantastic knowledge.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million, what color is the White House?
I know this.
5 seconds.
Oh, switching to Geico could save you a bunch of money on car insurance?
Okay. Judges? That's true, Kevin. They'll allow it. Congratulations. You're a winner.
Woo!
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. In for Bomani. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 1-888-729-3776. That's the number to hang out with us. ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. And, we were sitting here, each of us, last week, talking about the mega trade between the Celtics and the Cavs on different shows, respectively. Talking about the huge difference. What does it mean? What are they going to do?
Does this get anyone over the hump and beat Golden State?
Oh, that's the age-old question. You're required to ask that, right? You can't have an NBA conversation and not say the words Golden State. So we managed to sneak that in there. And all week, all this drama, and now it looks like this whole thing may be falling apart. If you missed it, the Celtics, obviously they trade Isaiah Thomas over to the Cavs. In the process of the physical, it looks like the Cavs have found some issues with Isaiah Thomas's hip that they're not comfortable with, and now reports are they may be asking for additional compensation. Mike Golick Jr., when you think about that, when you look at this trade, does it still have to happen in your mind?
Well, I would be more inclined to think that Boston is in a tougher spot with this one. Now, they're claiming that they were very upfront about everything with the Cavaliers as far as Isaiah's current health, the outlook for him as far as this season, and everything that comes up there. And clearly the Cavaliers' doctors feel different at this point. And so if you're Cleveland, the way I see it from them is you're in a unique situation. That's the only reason you were trying to get into this. But on the off chance that this trade were not to go through, you get back Kyrie Irving, and there's still a lot of interest around that. If you're Boston, you're trying to get rid of a guy in Isaiah Thomas who had a career year last year, who's at an all-time high, who's made it clear he wants to get paid big dollars, and based off what we see, someone around the league would be willing to do so. But I don't know if you're going to get this king's ransom, if you're going to get a better player in return for him the way you did with Kyrie Irving anywhere else at this point. And so if you're them, knowing you want to try and move him before that free agency comes up where he could just leave because you don't seem compelled to pay him, I don't know how Boston's not in the tougher spot of the two.
Doesn't this create some sort of an awkward situation, too? Because if you're Isaiah Thomas, you come back, at least Kyrie Irving, he went in and initiated this whole process. Isaiah Thomas has now been traded, which I can only equate to walking in one day, and it doesn't matter. Let's say you work for a computer company. You walk in one day, you go to sit down at your desk, and all your stuff is already in a box. And they're like, hey, by the way, you now work for the computer company down the street. We traded you. So, we're going to ask you to go somewhere else. That's fine, but when you get to your new office, if that suddenly falls through, how do you feel about driving back down the street to the old place that just essentially dumped you and said they don't want you there? I mean, it's a difficult thing in and of itself to take, and in the process of it, if the trade is being nixed because of hip health injury concerns, that's not easy to say. On top of that, then you have to look at it and say, what's his market value to anybody else? So it's not like he can suddenly insist he go somewhere else. He may be stuck where he is, and where he is, it's going to be human nature to feel very unwanted in the process.
It will be, but when you look at what the two are going back into, like Kyrie Irving is going back into a place and in a locker room potentially then where he was the one that said, I want out. So now you're looking at the rest of the guys in that locker room you have to play with, who we already hear about Kyrie not talking to for long stretches during the playoffs, and create an even weirder scenario. At least Isaiah, the guys he's mad at are on the top floor of that building. You can go back into that locker room and be like, listen, none of these guys tried to kick me to the curb. I didn't have any bad blood with them. This was the front office making a very clear distinction. So that at least affects less of the day-to-day for me than with Kyrie. But to your point, I think Isaiah is a lot harder to move if this doesn't go through, knowing what we know now more about the injury concerns that are stalling it than Kyrie.
I mean, Kyrie at some point, if he's coming back, it's not like he's unpacking his bags. I mean, he'll come back and stay like an extended stay while he waits, and just waits to be moved somewhere else, because the fact is he knows he's not going to stay in Cleveland. I think the tougher situation for coming back is for Isaiah, because I'm not sure there's going to be another value that would make a ton of sense. Our own Adrian Wojnarowski talked about this, and he talked about it with Sage Steele on what these teams have to lose if it falls through. This is what Woj had to say. Maybe.
You got to get his name right for them to play the right sound fits.
Wojnarowski. You know that this is
Wojnarowski.
This is. I do fine when you're not with me. It's when you're with me that it suddenly creates the awkwardness. But
I strike fear into your heart.
Well, that's what I think of. I don't think of a big cuddly bear. I think of a fear. Right there.
Well, no, and rightly so. Listen, but you got to at some point start to get. I mean, we're getting towards that point where Woj has now been here long enough where Wojnarowski has to roll off the tongue a little quicker. And someone not really well known for being a wordsmith, coming from the family I come from. I mean, if my dad and I are the beacons of hope for pronouncing Wojnarowski right at this company, you guys all have to take a long, hard look in the mirror and say, what's up?
You know what? I've done staggeringly well. And for anyone that doesn't know, Golick Jr. and I did some Mike and Mike together and I managed to butcher the name so much that they started trying to put it in to the update just to make me say it as often as possible. So here's Woj with with what his thoughts on what they have to lose if the trade falls through.
Why all of a sudden is this seemingly a surprise to Cleveland?
What Cleveland's going to contend here is that they were under the impression that Isaiah would be ready sooner into the season than the sense they've gotten after their physical, that this could be a longer rehabilitation process than they were led to believe when they agreed to the trade.
What's your gut, though, as we wrap this up? What's your gut as far as what happens?
Again, I think both teams have a lot to lose here and are going to work hard to finalize this deal this week.
I mean, there is a point where when you look at the loss versus the gains in this situation, we were talking a week ago about what this meant for both teams on a positive side. Now you're looking at it saying this has got to be like that really awkward moment where you're trying to go, like your ex is taking you back, right? Your ex essentially traded you, and now everybody's sort of wised up, and you're going back.
And now it becomes, if you're Boston, are you willing to give things up? Because Cleveland had that pipe dream going into this of trying to pry away like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and some of those young guys that Boston just wasn't willing to deal. But we know Boston's got, more future first-round picks under their control or other teams' control. They've got things that they can deal with this. It's just a matter of if Boston, are you so compelled to do this that you're willing to break off your post and say, no, we're up front like you're beating the drum with now, or do you kind of admit defeat because you need to move this and just throw another pick in there, throw something knowing you're not giving up return on one of those actual young players that you've drafted?
But at some point, you're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. At some point, don't you have to look at this and say, we were already questioning the value a week ago, and so now you want to throw more in there? I mean, negotiation 101, sure. I mean, Cleveland maybe, let's just say, since you're all conspiracy theorists, that the fight ended at exactly the moment that Mayweather wanted to end the fight. If we're going to take that conspiracy theory, you can look at this and say, all right, well, our doctors are going to do a physical, and then from that physical, we're going to decide we want one of these players that we wanted from the get-go, and we're going to get even more. A week ago, we were questioning the trade and the quid pro quo of it. And you can't tell me that if more pieces are added, that it doesn't begin to feel even more unbalanced from the outside looking in.
This is about what Danny Ainge is willing to do, because it's basically put in a position now where Danny Ainge, the guy who we pride on making all the right moves with the Celtics and building up this nice war chest of number one picks and these different things that become such advantages and talking points about him, is he willing to swallow some pride and throw that pick out knowing that they've got to move Isaiah, or is he going to say, no, I'm not going to give up on the way I've built this, we'll stick it out with Isaiah, and then potentially face the prospect of looking ugly on the back end of this when Isaiah hits free agency? If you can't move him before that because of anything else, if he falls up off this perch of that 29 points per game or whatever it was last season, and coupled with this injury, and all of a sudden you don't get the same returns, do you then just put off the amount of time until you look bad again?
I mean, but ultimately, for what? If the flip side of it is you give up more, all right, you gave up even more. You gave up an additional draft pick so that you can have the opportunity to lose to Golden State. And you can have the opportunity to maybe not even be better than Cleveland in the eyes of some. So you gave up even more equity to accomplish what exactly? I mean, why would you in that situation give up more equity when there's really nothing for you to gain when it comes to, we've been talking about participation trophies. That's about the best that they have a shot at. The Celtics have a shot at a participation trophy. Whoopee. Do you give up more for that?
Well, you do if you believe that you can re-sign a guy who's 25 years old, a perennial all-star, and now a champion coming off of his time in Cleveland that a lot of people believe has benefited from learning, growing under that championship environment with LeBron James. If you believe the coupling Gordon Hayward and those young pieces and a lot more of those future draft picks with those two guys in particular can make you better, then yeah, it's kind of like a quarterback in the NFL. Maybe there's no amount that you don't give up when you've gotten to this point already.
Yeah, but at some point, if you give all that up and it doesn't get you to the spot where you want to be, you at least have to have the plan on the additional pieces you're going to add. And if you're giving up future equity, or if you're making the team around him worse to do that for a player that we were already questioning the value of in this trade, I have to wonder how it puts Boston in a short-term or long-term situation that allows them to be so much better that they can actually win an NBA championship, because that ultimately is the goal.
Listen, we've been allowing Danny Ainge to keep building for the future for a long time. I don't know why we'd stop now. And Kyrie Irving is still, in my mind, investing in the future. It's just doing it in a way that's less uncertain, maybe less hope-inspiring than draft picks that we can build into whatever we want. But still, as a young guy in this league who's one of the best at his position, I think it still can be an investment in the future if you believe you can ultimately re-sign him when he hits free agency.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Right Time with Bomani Jones. But Bomani's not here. Instead, it's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. They're letting us hold down the fort. 1-888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. You guys know ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. And The Right Time is brought to you by Firestone Complete Auto Care. Keeping cars running newer, longer, whatever you drive a Firestone. So, Mike Golick Jr., we have another, this is sort of like the weekly thing. We come out of the preseason, and I feel like you're looking at Twitter at this point, not you specifically, but you, the society, is looking at Twitter, and they're keeping in track on, it's like a running list. Who's standing, who's not standing, who's sitting, who's protesting. Everybody's trying to figure out what every single person is doing in the process of the national anthem at this point. And it's almost interesting to me in that sense that I feel like we're keeping score of everything going on. So we now have a situation where 49ers safety Eric Reed has taken a knee for the national anthem. He knelt with Colin Kaepernick last year. He said he was not going to kneel during the anthem this season, but that changed on Sunday. Does that impact you in some way? I mean, are we at a point, and for me personally, I'll just throw it out there, and I know that this isn't always popular. For me personally, I like my sports and my music to be escapism. I don't really care about my athletes or my entertainers trying to change the world. I just care about enjoying the sort of some time away. And I think that there's a lot of sports fans that I've talked to when I've hosted other shows on the network that are in that same boat. You know, that there's a point where it's like, let's just sit back and have some fun and watch some sports. So for me, this just doesn't have the hitting impact at this point. I think that, I'm looking at it saying, okay, he knelt. I don't really know where to go with it from there. What hits you about it?
Well, I think at this point what hits me about it is it's starting to become more commonplace, and so people are starting to actually ask. I heard the turn happen a while ago where people said, all right, we've seen kneeling, now tell us what you're actually trying to talk about. And I'm like, that's great, because that's all anyone wanted to do from the beginning was get you to just ask about what they were trying to support. And so now we've gotten some of that, and that's why I thought it was interesting hearing from Eric Reed speaking after the game, because he said he wasn't going to kneel, and then he felt affected by current events and went out and had this to say about it after the game.
Just had a change of heart, a lot of thinking, a lot of praying, talking to Colin. When we started last year, if you recall, we said that our goal was to raise awareness and shed light on the issues that were happening in our country. I think we accomplished that goal. What I was upset about was the narrative, the false narratives that was being told about us. People were saying that we're un-American, that we were against police entirely and the military, and that just wasn't true. And at first I thought that was a small sacrifice to pay to get the word out, to again raise that awareness. And I settled with thinking raising that awareness was victory. Then fast forward to Charlottesville, and the country sees what an un-American protest really looks like. And that's when I had my change of heart, because what Colin, Eli, and I did was a peaceful protest fueled by our faith in God to help make our country a better place. And I feel like I need to regain control of that narrative and not let people say that what we're doing is un-American, because it's not. It's completely American. We're doing it because we want equality for everybody. We want our country to be a better place. So that's why I decided to resume the protest.
So you hear that and you say, all right, as we continue to look, because I'm with you, we've seen a lot of the same things. And so people kind of, especially in our line of work, like you said, maybe get tired of hearing about it the same way. But at least there you hear a thoughtful explanation of, I want to show people the contrast of what we've been doing versus what you saw happen in Charlottesville. Because for so long, what we did was demonized in a way that this truly bad thing that we all saw happen in Charlottesville should have been. And now you can hopefully see the difference when they're placed side by side. That's at least saying, all right, look at what we've been talking about and look at it at this new way.
So I guess we're switching roles at this point, because early in the show you were ever the cynical, Mayweather decided when he wanted to end the bout, like the sort of jaded Mike Golick Jr. right there, little jaded for Gojo. I'm going to take the other side at this point and look at it and say, I think on this particular issue, so many people have made up their minds what it's about, and nobody's listening anymore. So everybody's yelling, but nobody's listening. And I don't think that anything that happens now is going to necessarily change that. There are certain times, if you've ever been in a relationship with somebody where all you guys do is yell, you realize at some point there's one or two things you can do. You can fix your communication style, or you can just end the relationship. And more often than not, it ends up being a end the relationship sort of situation, because you can't necessarily change the way people communicate. And you can go all day long communicating what you're trying to say. But, for example, I took a communication class years and years ago, and part of what they taught you in that class was how to convert your message into who's receiving it. So if you want to say something, if I want to say something to you, and I know you receive communication a certain way, then I have to actually translate my words to the best way to communicate to you if I want you to receive it the right way. So we took this whole team building thing back then to try and learn these skills. And what it really taught me is that most people don't do that. So you can take a knee and you can be right. And you can look at it and you cannot appreciate that someone's taking a knee, and you can also be right. I mean, it's in this entire process, nobody's really talking to anybody. Everybody's, or let me say it this way, nobody's listening to anybody. Everybody's just talking to everybody. And at some point for me, that's where I check out and say, I want my entertainment.
Well, I would disagree with that, because a lot of these guys are actually going out and doing things in their community. I mean, Malcolm Jenkins, who came up in this recently because Chris Long threw his hat behind him, has been out doing things. He's been going and trying to bridge the gap in all this. So to say that one side is not, one side is yelling about this or not changing their style, these guys have adapted at every turn when all the things thrown at them are saying, all right, well, show us that you're actually doing things, affect change, don't just talk about it.
I'm not saying that nothing's being done. In fact, that's not at all what I'm saying. And if that's how it conveys, then that's on me. I'm not saying nothing's being done. And I think that you can look at these protests and you can say, hey, there are several examples of athletes going out and putting their money where their protest is, putting their time where their protest is, all of these things. What I'm saying is that the protest is no longer being received by people viewing the protest. You've already decided, for most of America, you've decided where you stand on somebody taking a knee or standing. And once you've made that decision on it, you're not listening to what anyone else has to say. So it's one of those things where you're, like you said earlier, a circular discussion. That's what we're all having at this point.
I think I just disagree in what I've heard so far from the feedback. What I've heard is, okay, we've seen the kneeling. Now, what are you actually talking about? And my point is that was where we were supposed to go all along. So I think maybe now we have a chance of getting somewhere productive.
But even in that sense, to me, I look at some of the conversation about who's been doing what. It's a very curious situation to try and figure out how any of us will actually listen to any of us in the process.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. We're in for Bomani Jones. 1-888-SAY-ESPN. That's 1-888-729-3776. ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. Now you can test drive Snapshot to see how much you could save before switching to Progressive. Visit progressive.com/snapshot. All of our guests appear on the right time via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Speaking of which, Jeff Darlington joins us right now. And Jeff, one of our favorite NFL reporters out there for everything that's going on right now. I want to start with the Vontaze Burfict situation, 5-game suspension. Did that surprise you when you first heard it, Jeff?
Yes, it did, honestly. I mean, I did not see it coming at all, and I don't know that anybody really did. I mean, the hit itself got so little attention to the point where it wasn't even flagged. So yeah, it was definitely surprising, and I think even after further review, it continues to be surprising, if not for the name on the back of his jersey. I mean, that's the one thing I think that nobody can essentially be surprised by, right?
So, Jeff, I know this appeal is going to get heard on Tuesday alongside the Ezekiel Elliott suspension appeal. Which do you think has a better chance of getting reduced at this point?
You know, both feel like they could potentially, but they're both such different types of situations. Burfict feels like it could be one of those things where it gets reduced, like, hey, we told you to chill. We have this point of emphasis. You know, we'll reduce it by a game, that kind of a thing. Whereas Ezekiel Elliott's such a much different situation that's going to be this is going to go down the same road, in my opinion, in my prediction, I should say, of Deflategate. No matter what happens, if that suspension gets upheld, I could see this creating another legal drama for the NFL and the NFLPA, and one that continues to linger for months. Whether there's courtroom stays and all that type of stuff, we'll have to see. But I think the two situations, while they're happening coincidentally on the same day in New York, are incredibly different. Will definitely be, and in very different results as well.
We're talking to Jeff Darlington, and Jeff sort of set a baseline for me of what the punishment would if Vontaze Burfict's name was not attached to it, and that same hit happens from someone else. What's the baseline of what that punishment would and should be?
A fine, honestly. I mean, a hefty fine. It's that. I don't know. When you look at it, and I'm not suggesting that the NFL did not make the right call, because Burfict has lost the benefit of the doubt. I guess the thing that I have trouble grasping is the ambiguity of the rule. The point of emphasis this year, it's not a new rule, it's a point of emphasis that a defenseless receiver has to be protected if he's hit from the side or from the back. And if you look at that play, to me it looks like it's close enough to the front where you could maybe justify like a penalty in a bang-bang moment. But beyond that, I don't know. I mean, it's within 5 yards. Like, it doesn't feel that illegal to me. So baseline, I would say a fine, even though in March at the owners' meetings, teams were essentially told that refs have been empowered to eject or suspend players for hits like that. I just don't think that this specific hit falls under that umbrella. So truly, baseline, I'd say a fine at this point.
Jeff, switching gears a little bit, the Patriots dealt a pretty impactful injury blow this weekend. How much do you think the loss of Julian Edelman is going to impact this offense this weekend, knowing what it's looked like in the past, going back as recently as 2015?
So I struggle with this one because, we talk so much about next man up with the Patriots, and I get it because they have proven to be really good at that. But I just think that's so much easier said than done. And the one thing I was talking to some people at the Patriots, they were saying that his communication with Tom Brady is so good and so essential, especially in third down situations, that that's not easily replaceable. The good news is that Chris Hogan has had a really exceptional camp and seems to be understanding a very complex offense this year in year two, which so he could be the guy on the rise to potentially replace Edelman. And of course, for the Patriots fans, they're probably really appreciating that they got Brandon Cooks, because he's just been looking like a beast this training camp too. So they've got the pieces in place to replace Edelman. I think that it's not as easy as we're all making it sound by saying, next man up or whatever.
We're talking to ESPN sports reporter Jeff Darlington. Jeff, over the weekend, DeShone Kizer named the starter in Cleveland. Blake Bortles named the starter in Jacksonville. Will that be significant for either team in your mind at the end of this year?
DeShone Kizer, yes. Blake Bortles feels like he's at the end of the road. I mean, I understand. I was in Jacksonville this past weekend, and I get where they're coming from. I thought the idea of potentially giving Chad Henne the start was off-based. I think we all know what Chad Henne is, at least, and I'm sure this is frustrating to Jags fans, but at least go down the road with Blake Bortles and burn that house to the ground. Find out for sure that that he's not your guy. Because you know what you have in Chad Henne. Nobody thinks that Chad Henne is going to have a renaissance and become an NFL starter. So at least spend the time on that third overall pick. If it doesn't click, then move on. But, like, it's not like the Jaguars. They have a pretty good defense, but it's not like Chad Henne is the difference between getting them to the playoffs and not. I mean, this is the difference between getting, 7 wins instead of 5, maybe. So I don't think that's that significant. DeShone Kizer, yeah. I mean, I think that the Browns, the only thing I question here is the fact that, like, DeShone Kizer, they didn't necessarily want him in the situation where he's starting week 1. And if that's the case, and they've said that, then why was Cody Kessler and Brock Osweiler your other options? Because they were essentially, I mean, the writing was on the wall. Kizer, as soon as they drafted him, when you look at that depth chart, was going to wind up with the starting job. And I don't necessarily know that puts him in a great position, but he's at least a guy that gives them some hope. We'll just see what happens when the bullets start flying, if he can also continue to kind of keep on the trajectory that has been this training camp.
Jeff, last one, and then we'll let you go. How's Lake Compound today?
Dude, can you hear it?
We heard the giggling and the splashing in the background. We figured you had to be at the picnic.
I wish you could see where I was at. Like, I'm trying to, like, escape. For your listeners, the company the ESPN picnic is today. I don't know where you guys are at because it's free booze, and I figured the two of you would be here for that. But
that's why they didn't let us there, Jeff. Like, they actually specifically said, no, not you two.
So I'm always on the road and never really in Bristol. Lately I've been doing studio stuff, and I showed up today, and people are like, company picnic. They rent out an entire amusement park. Like, I had no idea that this was happening. So I'm here, and as you can hear, it's a good time.
Jeff, we appreciate you joining us from the picnic, man. Have a couple extra funnel cakes for your boy, all right? We won't be able to get over there.
You got it, guys. No problem.
Thanks, Jeff. You can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Darlington. It is one of the great, why did we not get to do like a live remote? Golic Jr., we could have hung out at the picnic and talked to people as the show went on. The show would have gotten very interesting.
So as people probably know, my dad's been working at this company for a while, so I used to go to this picnic all the time as a little kid, and I was so jacked up because as a chubby little 10-year-old kid, all you're focused on is the fact that you can go here and get free fried Oreos and pop whenever and wherever you want, and there's no line for any of the rides. So the ESPN company picnic is a hell of a scene.
Free fried Oreos and grown-up pop still sounds like a delicious and fantastic way to spend a Monday.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
We just had Jeff Darlington on live from the ESPN corporate picnic theme park.
He's caused caused a lot of drama in the Golic family now. I'm starting to get texts from mom and dad. Mom had no idea the picnic was today. Feels like dad withheld that information for her, and now she is very upset.
Well,
very upset. Good luck, Dad.
You never withhold open bar info in my marriage anyway. That's a cardinal sin. So we just talked a little bit to Jeff about it, and I want to talk to you, Golic Jr., about this Vontaze Burfict thing, because when you think about the fact that it's a 5-game suspension for an illegal hit in the middle of a game, that many are questioning whether it was actually illegal or whether it was legal. It should be noted it wasn't even a penalty in the course of the game. When you saw, first and foremost, as somebody that played the game, when you saw the hit, did it strike you as illegal?
No, it's jarring, like, in that moment. Those are one of the hits that if it were anyone else but Vontaze Burfict, you'd replay that, you'd go, man, that's what I'm talking about, and you'd move on. But because Vontaze Burfict's kind of got this history, you knew they were going to take a long, hard look at it, one-fold because of him, and two-fold because this is a rule that they just changed this spring. And one thing that the NFL does every year is when the competition committee votes on new rules that they put in place, one of them you heard Jeff mention was essentially what amounts to the targeting rule from college, where refs can throw a player out during the game because of an egregious and unnecessary hit, multiple unsportsmanlike. That was something they played around with last year unofficially. And now this year voted on for sure. But the other thing they changed was the defenseless receiver rule. They included receivers in those positions that were either getting hit from behind or in the head and neck, and that includes within 5 yards from the line of scrimmage. So that's why it applies to this particular situation where you had a back that was still within that 5 yards coming out of the backfield.
Well, he could have avoided all this after the hit if he had just gotten him some flowers. Nothing makes a summer birthday, anniversary, or a staggering hit more magical than 1-800-Flowers.com. Right now, when you order a dozen multicolored roses for only $29.99, you'll get another dozen absolutely free. Just go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. And I think that at some point, the difficulty in this is separating Vontaze Burfict from the actual hit, because we can agree that he has a reputation that he's earned. He's earned every piece of the reputation he has. And that means that because of past action, we suspect every time he does something that he's in the wrong. But that doesn't necessarily mean he was actually in the wrong in this situation. It's difficult because it's one of those borderline moments that, as you mentioned, any other player, we're replaying it over and over again. A few years ago, it would have been a hit highlight on Madden. I mean, we would have looked at it
on Jacked Up, man. We used to do that segment right here. That would have been Jacked Up number one play of the week. And
instead of that, you're looking at a guy in Vontaze Burfict being, because of the lost paychecks, $353. That's a hefty fine for something that's borderline. I mean, you're talking about over almost $900,000 at this point for a hit that we're all looking at and saying, well, I don't know, legal, not legal, legal, not legal. I mean, even if he's been a bad guy, that seems like a dangerous and strange precedent to come out of nowhere for this guy. It's like they're using him as an example.
Well, it's exactly what they're using him for. And I'm telling you, this is how it works. During training camp, the league sends out a videotape that makes up and shows these are the rule changes that we're telling our referees to emphasize. We're saying this play is, they put, video examples. This is the wrong way to do this. This is the right way to do this. And we've seen this come up a lot in the last few years because of the change in emphasis on where the hits come from in the NFL as head and neck injuries become more of a focal point. And so with this, what it sounds like to me is the NFL said, we're making an example out of this because this is something we wanted to emphasize right away. We've got a guy that's been a repeat offender on some of these head and neck shots in the past, and now we can let everyone know, listen, this is what's going to happen on the very worst end of this. Because to your point, stands to lose base salary $882,353. That is almost the same amount that he's lost so far already in his career, which is crazy. He's been flagged 16 times for unnecessary roughness and fined almost $800,000 already.
Let me just be very clear. As someone that I feel, I like to refer to myself as frugal. My friends may say I'm cheap. For me, if I get like 2 speeding tickets, I never speed again. Like, because there's a point that nothing is worth the $150. Like, it's just not worth it, So I'm looking at what's the not worth it point for him.
This becomes interesting because it's what are you asking him to do? And this is clearly a move that's predicated on taking yet another thing away from defenders. Because I heard my dad ranting and raving about this morning, and it's true. This used to be football, and I understand you're trying to protect against head and neck injuries, but when this hit, you go back and look, doesn't look like it was a hit to the head and neck. All of a sudden, all you're doing is removing another tool from the belt from guys on one side of the ball that are already put at a disadvantage. And the rest of us are saying, all right, well, we know this league as a whole prioritizes offense. But, man, when you're costing a guy this kind of money because you want to make a point on a rule that's got that as the ultimate end, man, that seems like it's gone too far. And that's why ultimately I think this one will get shortened a bit when they hear the appeal.
And at some point, this is going to be the precedent. This is going to be the mark, the line in the sand, and that's the opportunity they have here. So however they turn around and adjust this, they've at least set a bar for what is expected for these guys and for what the punishment will be, and that's always a challenge in today's NFL, is to understand the bar of what punishment will be, where punishment has been, and what will be happening in the future.
Thanks for listening to the Right Time Podcast. Please come back tomorrow for more. And don't forget to listen to The Right Time with Bomani Jones from 4 p.m. to 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.